Okay, so thank you all for participating today. Before we get started with the formal presentation, we just want to make sure that you can hear us okay, and the way we can tell that is if you raise your hand, then we know that you can hear what I'm saying. Great, thank you. So welcome, it is April 20th of 2020 and the time is 9:01 a.m. And thank you for attending the State Board of Licensure for Architects, Professional Engineers, and Professional Land Surveyors stakeholder meeting via webinar today. Before we get started, we want to introduce ourselves from the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present on the webinar. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm a regulatory analyst with the division. Also attending today is Joyce Young, the program director of the board, Christy Thomas, the program manager, and Elena Kemp, regulatory coordinator. We will be facilitating this stakeholder meeting today. The division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual amidst concerns with the spread of COVID-19. We appreciate your flexibility. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business. Your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout the process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting or amending the rules we will be discussing today. More specifically, we will be discussing proposed changes to all board's rules in compliance with section 24.103.3, which mandates a regularly scheduled review of the rules to assess the continuing need, appropriateness, and cost effectiveness of its rules to determine if they should be continued in their current form, modified, or repealed. The statutorily guided principles for review are to ensure the rules are necessary, do not overlap or duplicate other rules of the agency, federal, state, or local government rules, are written in plain language and are easy to understand, achieve the desired intent, and determine if more or less regulation is necessary, are amended to provide flexibility, reduce regulatory burdens, and reduce unnecessary paperwork or steps, if at all possible, while maintaining their benefits, are implemented in an efficient and effective manner, including the requirements for the issuance of permits and licenses, have a timely cost-benefit analysis produced, if requested, pursuant to section 24.103, subsection 2.5, and are adequate for the protection of the safety, health, and welfare of the state or its residents. Just as a simple reminder, the board has no ability to change the legislation as it currently exists. The board's responsibility in this exercise and in this rulemaking project is to look at the rules as they currently exist, and the board can make any changes on the rules, but the board has no authority to change any legislation. That'll go through the legislative process. Before we get started with the process, I'm going to turn it over to Joyce Young, who is the program director of the board, for a couple of comments as well.
Hello, everybody. This is Program Director Joyce Young. I did just want to point out, as we go through these, we're going to go through the red line revisions. We have taken out rules that are not, that the board did not identify where changes are needed. So you will only be seeing the rules that are under consideration for revision, and then any corresponding rules around those that might provide context to the rule changes. We do have some stakeholder comments that came in prior to the meeting that we'll be sharing with the board, and the revisions that you will be seeing today also contain 4 corrections, just a few technical, and then some that had some relevancy to outside statutory citations. You will see those highlighted within the red line revisions as we go through those. And so I think we'll just take it through the sections, and if anyone has comments, we'll be recording those comments for the board's consideration. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joyce. So as Joyce mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. and will be posted on the website at a later date in case there's something that you hear that you want to revisit or provide additional comments on after the meeting. As this stakeholder meeting is being held solely by webinar, in order for you to speak, we ask that you raise your hand by using the hand icon. If you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you'll be heard by everyone and be captured on the recording. Or you can type your comment in the question section and we will read it aloud. Before we start taking comments, we do ask that if you are providing input, that you state your name and who you represent. Feel free to provide either general comments on a certain rule changes, or specific comments on the proposed language, like you think a word should be stricken or a word should be added. Both are helpful. And keep your comments limited to 3 to 5 minutes or less, just to make sure. We do have a number of people participating today, so we want to make sure that we get through everyone's comments. So if you do start to get close to that 5-minute mark, I will interrupt you, and that way we can move on to the next person. And try not to repeat something that was already said, but if you are in agreement with something that someone else said, please state that so we can note that to show that the consensus of the group on a certain change. If you're using audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer audio or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. And then last, sometimes people log in with both the computer audio and the phone audio, which causes a great deal of echoing. So please use, if you are planning on speaking, either the phone audio through the webinar or the computer audio on your computer. So with that, we will go ahead and start taking comments. We'll progress through the rules as you see them on the screen to try and stay as organized as possible. So let me get to my spot. If anyone has comments, do you mind scrolling up, Elena, to the top? Okay, so looking at Rule 1.2, if anyone has any comments on the proposed changes in Rule 1.2, please raise a hand. And we do have a few hands raised. I'm not sure if it's, let me see, I'm not sure if it's the people who are raising hands to let us know they could hear us, but we'll just go through the list and take people that have hands raised, and then we'll go through questions. So, I see.
So this is,
go ahead.
This is Joyce. These are just the changes to abbreviations on this first section.
Francis McGarry, I show that you have your hand raised. I am going to, you're unmuted on our end if you want to speak.
That was for the roll call at the beginning.
Okay, great. I'll lower your hand, or you can do it, and I'll mute you again. Thank you. Joseph Rumier, I also show a hand raised. I'm not sure if that's for a roll call or if you want to speak. I'll go ahead and unmute you. Okay, you lowered it. Thank you. Sean Lee, I show your hand is raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you want to speak. You are now unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes, just NSPS, National Society of Professional Surveyors.
Which is showing on the screen right now.
Yes.
Scroll back up a little bit, Elena. NSPS. Yes. Okay. Did you want to change that or just
That's the National Society of Professional Surveyors. That is how they represent themselves throughout the nation. This is Shelley from the Professional Land Surveyors of Colorado.
so instead of surveys, it should be surveyors?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sina Sabotikin, I'm going to unmute you. Sina Sabotikin, you are unmuted. I don't know if it was a hand raise at the beginning or if you wanted to speak, but you are unmuted on our end if you want to provide any input. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute you and lower your hand. If you do want to provide any comments, you can re-raise your hand and we'll cut back to you. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised at this point. We're going to take a look at the questions that we've received before we move on to the next section. So we have a question from someone on how to raise hands. There's a hand icon that you should be able to see on your webinar. If you just click the hand icon, that will raise a hand. So hopefully you have that question answered. We did receive the same comment from Waylon Bryant about the surveyors being spelled incorrectly. So we'll make sure that that gets fixed. And then from Cole Conger, can we add cross-referencing to the testing requirements? Example, as a land surveyor, I need to have 3 professional land surveyor references. Why can we not include professional engineers to count towards that requirement and vice versa? I don't think we're quite there yet, but we can revisit that. And then we'll go to the next question that I received from Peter Markshausen is in Rule 1.3. So we will go ahead and move on from 1.2 and now take comments for Rule 1.3 and the draft changes there. So if anyone wants to speak, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. I see some hands raised. Before we go to the hands raised, I'll read the comment from Peter Markshausen. Rule 1.3A3. Why would the board consider allowing another person to use a seal by removing the wording shown? I think the wording is fine and tends to better protect the public. I do not have a microphone. Okay, thank you. And Joyce, if you want to jump in at all, just feel free.
This is Joyce. The board just felt that matched current practices as far as the way business offices work nowadays, and we can definitely take your comment to the board so they can consider your comments on that for sure.
Okay, and I'm showing a hand raised by Scott Thompson. Scott Thompson, you are unmuted on our end.
I'm with PLSC as part of the legislative committee, and we had submitted written comments. I just wanted to make sure that those were arrived at the board, or that you had those, and we didn't need to reiterate all those comments verbally.
Let me verify that, Scott. You should receive a confirmation email too that they were received. Did you send them to the rulemaking inbox?
Yes, they were sent, and they were actually sent by Steve Parker, president. and we had quite a few comments. I just, if you already have those, there's no point for me to go over them all again, right?
We did receive them on Wednesday, April 15th.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and mute you then, and then Andrew Garner, I am unmuting you.
Hi there. Back to that same rule that Peter Marks has on how to comment on the individual versus the professional shall be responsible. I think that the point is we issue documents that occasionally could get misused by other individuals, and I'm not sure how we avoid that in all cases. In other words, somebody could take something you stamped and just do a little screen capture and place that somewhere. So I think that's what Peter's comment is about, and I really think it needs to be reviewed.
So this is Joyce again. We'll provide that to the board. I think the board felt that applying the seal to documents may occur in an AES where the signing and dating of the seal is what is protected and necessarily presented forward with the documents. But again, we will definitely give your comments to the board for consideration.
Thank you. And just to follow up, are there rules that pertain to people that might misuse the stamp? I mean, in other words, is it a criminal or civil offense later on in the rule bylaws?
Yeah, this is Joyce, Program Director again. Let me state for everyone, I failed to mention this previously, but we are also conducting a task force about signing and sealing requirements. We had our first meeting on Friday with task force members, with individuals participating in that review of our rules regarding signing and sealing requirements. As yet, there have been little suggested changes to the rules in that first task force meeting, but we will have another task force meeting. I think one more probably will suffice for the task force regarding signing and sealing requirements. But the board is very specific about what is required for signing and sealing requirements. And if someone is found to be in violation, there are consequences both within the board, and there is potential for the license holder to seek other remedies as well, legally or otherwise, if they choose.
Okay, yeah, because I'm thinking somebody that's not a licensee applying a picture of my stamp to some other document. How are they going to get it?
So this is Joyce. The board has limited authority to unlicensed individuals, but the board does have some authority to issue what we consider to be like a cease and desist order to those individuals, if that happens. And then again, the licensee could have other remedies as well.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Lester Lyman, I am going to unmute you. You are unmuted, Lester Lyman.
Thank you. This is Lester Lamone with B3 Communities in Canyon City. I'm old enough that I remember having to, and that was a proper document, and that somebody couldn't take it from you. But I understand that the questions, electronic seals and says, But I use an Adobe ID recipient needs to have in order to understand that it is my official seal. And that's one way I think that the board could control some of that. And I also agree, Joyce, that what you said, you've got some limited authority, but we have the authority too if we find out as registered individuals or licensed individuals that that we've got some civil recourse with that. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy or fun, but we do. So that's my comment.
Okay.
This is Joyce again. This is Joyce again. I just want to, if individuals are interested in listening in on the task force conversations, we are posting those next meeting online. We're currently getting ready to organize that meeting. So if you want to submit information or provide feedback to the task force, being able to listen into the task force, we can absolutely get your contact information. If you could just respond and let us know that you want to listen in on that meeting, we'll be able to give dates when we have one set. So if we could, when it comes to actual signing and sealing requirements outside of the red line review that we're looking at right now, maybe we could, the conversation within the task force can kind of answer a lot of people's questions on those signing and sealing requirements.
All right. I'm going to go to the comments, which I think are also related to what Joyce and everyone has been talking about. Waylon Bryant, this is applicable for digitally imported seals in CAD drawings that a CAD tech, for example, may import for and on behalf of the engineer. Good change. Andrew Gardner, who we heard from, back to section that Peter Markhausen commented on. Douglas Steen. On the use of seal by the license holder only, I support the change as written. This allows the potential for a digital seal as well with coming changes. The licensee should be aware that the seal is used in any case. Peter Markhausen, follow up to share with the board need not be shared in webinar. Sorry, Peter, I will stop reading there if you don't want me to share it with everyone and relay the information to Joyce to get to the board. Douglas Steen, I would like to participate in the task force meeting. Great, thank you. And then Lester Limon would also like to participate in the task force. Okay, thank you. We'll relay that information to Joyce so that you can be included in those meetings. With that, I think that concludes all of the comments that we received on Rule 1.3. So we'll go ahead and move to the next rule. Rule 1.4, Rules of Administrative Procedure. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand or type in questions and we can read them out loud for the group and for the record on Rule 1.4. Catherine Lyon, I received your comment as well to be added to the task force, so just wanted to note that.
Okay.
Okay, I see that Scott Swartz has a hand raised. So Scott, I am going to unmute you. You are unmuted on our end. Scott Swartz. Scott, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Thank you. Just was a question about the teaching and the continuing education credits, because in addition to being a licensed architect, I also this you just are there, the section 6 teaching presentations, as I also teach, so I just wanted to that the part that you've struck out about classes, just a clarity thing. For example, if I teach a construction technology class that's got 10 sessions that it meets, does each presentation count, or does I'm sorry, it's just a clarity question, and it's not clear from the way this is worded. If my question makes sense.
Sure. This is Joyce, Program Director. Yeah, this is Joyce, Program Director. And this allows for the first presentation. So it takes out teaching, because when you're doing teaching, you're presenting the materials. So the first time you present is the credit that you give. when you're thinking about continuing education, it is truly that continuing education process. So you wouldn't get duplicative credit because you provided it over and over again. It's just the first time it's presented, or you would get credit for the preparation. So either or, and not both. In the spirit of continuing education, we're trying to make sure that, you know, it's not, there's not duplicative credit being given for the same work.
Yeah, I don't think I was quite clear. What I was meaning was, for example, if I'm teaching a 3-credit-hour construction technology course or a 3-credit-hour codes course, but it's 15 individual lectures or 10 individual lectures, how is the credit awarded? Is it awarded on credit hours of what you're teaching, I guess is the best way, or is it actual class time?
It is actual hours, so it's not based on credit hours, it's on actual hours, and it's the original material. So if it's different material that you've had to prepare, the first time you do that, you would get credit, but it is the 60-minute increments, not college credit hours.
Okay, thank you. Sorry if that was a bad question to ask, but it was just a clarity thing that doesn't make sense in the rule, or didn't make sense in the rules. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. And on those same lines, I believe we also have a written question. Lester Limon, curiosity, why is teaching being taken out of the requirements? Teaching requires an updated knowledge annually due to updated technologies and practices.
This is Joyce, Program Director. It's not that teaching is excluded, it is just a presentation. So that is part of teaching, would be your presentation of that material to your students.
Okay. Okay. And then Elena, can you go to 1.3A to G for architects? And it's a question from Eli Merhead. I'll wait till we get there so everyone can see. And it says, why not same policy as I believe that's A1A, we allow you to roll over up to 18 LUs, including 12 LU HSW earned in excess of the annual requirement to the next year with the website from the AIA. Does that question make sense, Joyce? To you?
I'm sorry, Darcy. This is me, Elena. I wanted to get the correct section. So which section are we going to again?
1.3A to G.
A to G.
I just want to make sure that Joyce understands in case we need to get any additional information from.
So maybe it's 1.4. 1.3 is rules of conduct.
It must be 1.4 for architects. So 1.4A to G for architects. Let me scroll down and see if we've received any additional. And then Lester Limon also said, oh, sorry, we just passed it apparently. That was it. Lester Limon said AIA allows carryover. Why don't you? Right under the table is what Eli Merhead said.
This is Joyce. The rules and between the board and AIA are not going to always be the same. and it was I believe it's in the statute regarding the continuing education.
You're in the right spot, Elena.
And making.
Sorry, Joyce.
That's okay. And the board, the determination is that it should be within each calendar year. And although that may be AIA standard for carryover, when the rules were first considered, there was a consideration of trying to get a consensus across the country for these types of things, and just providing, it seemed more nationally that it would be more in the national conversation at the time, was that it would be 12 per year.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. So I have a hand raised by Max Billington. Max Billington, you are unmuted on our end.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Max Billington with the RMH Group. Reading the words of that paragraph G, it says carryover of CEH credit, excess CEHs may not be credited to a past year, makes perfectly good sense, or a future renewal period, which basically means that carryover CEH credit is worthless, or it basically doesn't exist. If you can't bring it forward into the next period. I'm licensed in 6 states, and all of the states that I have continuing education requirements allow carryover credit to go into the next period of requirements. Joyce, could you re-explain, and perhaps I'm misunderstanding what this paragraph G actually is saying?
This is Joyce. It is saying exactly what you're saying. And I'm sorry, Max, you're an architect?
I'm an engineer.
Okay, engineering, yeah. So this again was a decision to keep the 12 continuing education hours per calendar year, and that they couldn't be awarded to any other year but that year. It was the decision of the board at the time when the continuing education was being considered to try and come to some agreement with the, I believe the conversation was with the NCARB, where if they could have some continuity, it would be 12 hours in each calendar year, and not being able to allow that to be carried over in the future or to account for any continuing education in the past. You know, all I can say is that there has to be some lines on when these are provided, and the intent to get your 12 continuing education hours in one calendar year was definitely the intent of the board at the time.
Okay, so in effect, that there is no such thing as a carryover credit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Nicholas Ramus, I did receive your written comments about whether your written comments were received via email. We did receive those on the 16th of April, and I'm going to unmute you now in case you want to provide any other comments. Nicholas Ramus, you are muted.
Just wanted to make sure that those were received. I will, since I don't need to restate them, I will, don't need to say anything else.
Okay, great, thank you.
And then Mr. Ramon said, where are you?
And then, sorry, I think. Then I have a written comment from Peter Markshausen. I'm sorry to backtrack. This core of this issue goes back to the controversy in 2007. This is a suggested addition. Bylaw Rule 1.32 requires ethical conduct. This rule is both overly broad and vague. yet simultaneously has minimal effect since ethical manner is not defined. I'd ask that the board do something similar to Wyoming to use the bylaws and policies section to indicate and provide guidance that the current rules adopted by the NSPE should be used as a guide. Fail that, an option to adhere to also ASCE, SEI, or similar group would be a good add to this section. Give direction. To this section, give direction. Okay. Joyce, any clarifying questions on that?
This is Program Director Joyce. I do not.
Okay. Another comment from Eli Merheb. It would be great to see what the new consensus is. Maybe 12 is too, but some flexibility would be appreciated. Nicholas Framus, first question is on page 9, CEH hour definition. Lester Limon, Weir, architect, not licensed yearly, but every 2 years. Why not allow a 2-year carryover? Lester Limon, why not in a license cycle? Eli Merheb, why was this eliminated on 1.3 A2K9? I don't know if you want to go there, Elena, 1.3 A2K9.
Great. Come here. Right. Right. Look at you. Look at you, Ozzy. Look at you, Ozzy.
For staff too, I don't think we have anyone that's not muted on the, we're hearing a little bit of outside feedback, so you might want to check your.
Hi.
Do you understand the question, Ms. Joyce, on 1.3 A2K9 and why it was eliminated?
It's actually 1.4.
Okay.
I think it's 13A2K9.
Okay. And do you understand the question? Is that enough for the board? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, let me get to that section really quick if I can.
Hi, Joyce. This is Elena. I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page.
Yeah. If you could go to page 9, I think, Elena. It's under, we're getting close. No, you can go down. I'm sorry. Yeah, underneath the table.
Here we go. Right there. Right there. Oh, go back up,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, no, you're right there. So this is about the mentoring. This is Joyce, since the course of this program, mentoring has never been utilized, and the board was trying to get rid of unnecessary rules that were not being utilized, and we have not seen this be utilized. It is typically something that is provided for like continuing education, or to qualify for licensure, but not necessarily continuing education. And so the board was just looking to remove any unnecessary rules that were not being utilized.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Nicole Lacra. Why not simply state there are no carryover CEHs for architects? Nathan Torres, just to be clear, the tables for CEH requirements presented here only apply to architects.
This is Joyce. That is correct. Architects are the only licensees within the Architects, Professional Engineers, and Professional Land Surveyors Board. Only architects have continuing education.
Okay. Jean Cooper, a question under 1.3E3. sorry for going back. This section was slated for deletion. I'd like to ask whether this section, the suggestion by the PS subcommittee was declined. That's 1.3E3 from Jean Cooper.
This is Joyce. The comments submitted on the 15th, I believe Darcy said it was, have not yet been reviewed by the board at all.
Okay. Drew Pasick, I agree that the period should be 2 years for continuing education credits. I am an architect. Jean Cooper, I show your hand is raised, so I am unmuting you on our end. Jean Cooper, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The reason I was asking this, Joyce, is because at the June 6, 2019 PE subcommittee meeting, the folks said that section should be deleted because, quote, it would prevent licensees from obtaining work due to their professional qualifications as a licensed professional. And so that's why I was just questioning why I didn't see this. Maybe that's going to be part of the task force for the sealing and signing issues for future discussions. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I had noticed this in the past from last year and that it didn't make it here, but I didn't see any reason for it not showing up now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Andy Barron, will the board later consider requiring PDHs or CEUs for engineers and surveyors? I think that would require a legislative change. Is that correct, Joyce?
This is Joyce. That is correct.
Nicole Lacra, has the board considered testing newly licensed architects on the Colorado DORA rules, similar to New Mexico?
This is Joyce. Again, that's a legislative issue, not an issue for the board to consider unless it's passed through legislation.
Okay. So I think Lester Limon said that's the architect's responsibility. It looks like we're through all the questions and hands raised for 1.4. So if we want to move on to 1.5, and as you've seen, we can go back. We don't want to miss anyone that has something to say. 1.5, rules of professional engineering practice. Okay, I see Mary Frances Nevins that you have your hand raised. You are unmuted on our end.
Thank you. This is Mary Frances Nevins from the Colorado Department of Transportation Project Support Engineering Division. Just to comment that we are submitting comments on Rule 1.5A2 as Program Manager Joyce mentioned, as part of the task force review on sealing. And may I make a comment on 1.5A3, or shall I wait for you to get to 1.5A3?
Please go ahead right now and we'll scroll down.
Okay. On Rule 1.5A3, CDOT would like to offer language, and the exact wording will be dependent upon the task force's consideration of 1.5A2. But for now, I offer it in concept that, well, I will be submitting comments to 1.5A3 for the task force's submission. I also have a brief comment to make on 1.5A7.
Okay.
CDOT will be submitting comments to the task force regarding 1.5A2 or 1.5A3. It also would like to wait to submit comments to 1.5A7, but in concept, what we would like to ask the board and the task force to consider is requesting that when the project is a roadway project or related to a roadway project, that the sealed, signed, and dated electronic document, or for surveyors in their section of rule, the plat, be submitted to the state agency. And the rationale is CDOT is required by state and federal law to retain documents and provide them not only to architects, engineers, and surveyors who may be doing subsequent work on a given roadway or area of Colorado, but is also responsible to respond quickly to Colorado Open Records Act and federal FOIA requests. So in the interests of Colorado citizens, we are trying to retain accurate sealed plans and plats and architectural drawings when relevant to roadway projects. We will be submitting this in writing. Thank you very much for the stakeholder meeting today and for establishing a task force. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Joyce, Program Director Joyce Young. I just want to note that the work of the task force will be incorporated into rule revisions. And so the stakeholders will have an opportunity to see those and comment on those once those changes are made, once those revisions are added to the revisions for the rules.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Anything else on 1.5? I don't see any more written questions. I'll double check those before we move on to 1.6. Mary Frances Nevins, I see your hand is raised again. You are unmuted.
Thank you. One more comment on 1.5A7. CDOT supports the proposed change, the strike through of 3 years from the date the documents were signed and sealed to the additional language time period not less than the statute of repose pursuant to section 13-80-104 CRS. Our only suggestion for the board's consideration is that sometimes we've found that even professionals will not necessarily go to the statute to check what time frame is recommended. So for the board's consideration, we offer including their the 6 year statute of repose, and additionally, CDOT does retain these sealed records permanently. That certainly doesn't impact the proposed change, but it does. It internally at CDOT we do retain permanently. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Joyce. I just wanted to clarify that the board did consider the revising restatement of the time period, but felt it was better to provide the citation in order for individuals to go to that citation and understand it, as well as any changes to that statutory reference within Title 13. Any changes would not require a change in our rule necessarily if there were just a time period change.
Okay. Mary Frances Nevins, I see your hand is up again. I am going to unmute you. You are unmuted.
Yes, CDOT would like to thank Program Manager Joyce for that explanation, and we agree.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I think now we can move on to Rule 1.6, Rules of Professional Land Surveying Practice, and I have a couple of hands raised. So Scott Thompson, you're the first hand raised. You are unmuted on our end.
I just wanted to point out that this rule was one of the most discussed rules with the PLSC committee that looked at it. And we had a lot of issues, a lot of problems with the referring to the statute of repose because of the notice portion of that. We're wondering about reports that are prepared for engineers, field data files and stuff, which unless they're accompanied by the notice, which I've almost never seen, it appears like there is no statute of repose on those. So we seek a lot of clarification on that rule, moving from a solid date to keep everything for an undetermined period. That and the fact that the surveyor's statute of repose and the engineers don't align with each other, but we work together on many, many projects. So those comments are in writing, but I wanted to bring it up briefly so everyone else could hear that. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Joyce, do you want to say anything before I move on to the next person?
This is Joyce. I do not. Thank you.
Okay, all righty. Jean Cooper, you are unmuted on our end.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I wanted to make two corrections to 1.6A7. It's not statute or repose, it's statute of repose. And then also the CRS citation of section 13.8.104 is for qualifications of judges in the Denver Juvenile Court. It should be 1380.105.
This is Joyce. Yes, we did get that change. I apologize. The draft rules we're looking at don't seem to have that, but I do have that on our corrected version, Jean.
Okay, thank you. And then also, because these rules are insured to have a bunch of insurances to them, under one of the things is that the rules are written in a plain language and are easy to understand. And for me, this is not clear for this, and I think Scott Thompson has also provided in his written comments issues on that. But the 3-year statute of repose, or a 3-year time frame, is a trigger. It depends on when the discovery of an error occurred or a defect in the survey occurred, and then it goes from 3 years from there, with a maximum not to exceed 10 years from the date it's been signed. But if someone fails to provide the text that's in statute 13.80.105.3.a, which is about the it discusses the a notice that you have to put on your plat. If that's not included in there, the Colorado Court of Appeals has ruled that the statute of limitations of 10 years or statute of repose of 10 years can be longer than that. So I think it would be very nice to, I understand why you want to go from a time to a site for the statute, but in this case, it could be 3 years, 10 years, or sometime past that. And potentially, I'd like to see if the board would be interested in adding a new rule that would require land survey plats and other plats to have that statement that's in CRS 1380.105.3.a as a way of sort of avoiding this to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Frances Nevins, you are unmuted on our end.
Thank you. This is Mary Frances Nevins with CDOT. Just stating that what we provided as input and will be providing as input for the engineer rule also will apply to the professional land surveyor rule 1.6.A.7 with regard to adding language requiring the professional land surveyor to submit plats or documents to CDOT for roadway projects. I'd also like to add to the very helpful comment that was just submitted on the statute of repose that CDOT is required by state and federal law to retain records, so plats and sealed documents under other circumstances, such as if the project is funded with emergency funding from the federal government, FEMA projects, if it is subject to internal or external audit, if it's an emergency project, or if it is a high-level project that by definition, like Central 70 would involve a lot of engineers, surveyors, and possibly architects. So there are other federal and state requirements that come into play as far as CDOT's responsibilities for record retention for both engineers, professional land surveyors, and architects. Thank you.
Hello, this is Nicholas Remus with AIA Colorado, and I have a quick comment on kind of the statute of repose discussion, since it does indeed affect all of our professions, even though the rules are different. At AIA Colorado, we've identified some court cases that put design professionals at risk of being named in lawsuits after the statute of repose. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to actually, I don't know if the rules should make suggestions for design professionals to keep their documents for longer, but the sad reality is that there's kind of no safe amount of time to get rid of documents. And I don't want the board to get into trouble to have people to say it's okay for design professionals to discard record sets when perhaps they should be keeping them for, I mean, a decade or more, even though the statute of repose is only a 6+2 system right now.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more written questions, but I'm going to double check those. I don't see any more written questions or any hands raised right now. I think we can move on.
This is Joyce. Okay. This is Joyce. I just want to make comment on the architects, the statutory change to that, the citation to the laws on the time period for repose is supposed to be 11380, not 113-8. So those will be updated as well.
Okay.
And that's the remaining section 1.7 that AIA just commented on.
Okay. Any more comments on 1.7, rules of practice for architects? I have another written question. Let me take a look at that. So Lester Limon, other than I think it should be architectural documents, not architecture documents, but that is semantic. Okay, thank you. So now that we've reached the end of the draft rules and the proposed changes, thank you for your feedback. We want to make sure, since we're participating via webinar, that we've heard from everyone that wants to provide any input. So I'm going to go ahead and give a couple more minutes until 10:11 to allow for anyone who wants to raise a hand or type in any questions or comments before we go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Thank you for your comment, Lester. We appreciate all your participation. Okay, Mary Frances Nevin, you are unmuted on our end.
Yes, this is Mary Frances Nevin from CDOT. We would just like to thank the board and staff for really changing its practices quickly to accommodate the COVID-19 virus and to move forward on rulemaking. We think the process has been very professional, and we appreciate you including us and taking the time to accommodate all of us sheltering in place. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Paul Potler, we can send you a quick email off the record with that information. Okay, a written comment from Mike Waldinger. Could you describe next steps? Does the board take up comments at a future meeting before proceeding on rules? Yes, we will go through next steps when we wrap up the meeting. So that's a great question because that's our next topic. Okay. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. I'm not seeing any more written comments. We will proceed. Thank you again for participating in today's meeting. The stakeholder comments and program recommendations will be presented to the board at the next board meeting, which is not on April 22nd. Joyce, when's your next meeting?
It is May 8th.
May 8th, okay. Then deliberated on during the permanent rulemaking hearing, which we anticipate will be on June 12th of 2020. Is that correct, Joyce?
You got it.
Okay, so that one's correct. So at the meeting on May 8th, the board, like I mentioned, will have an opportunity to review all of these comments and make any additional changes that the board wants to make. And then from there, we'll determine whether it's necessary. Say the board doesn't make any changes and we've already received stakeholder input, then we'll determine what the stakeholder process looks like to continue to get additional input. So you saw on the notice for the meeting today is the rulemaking inbox. We thank you to those of you who did submit written comments. Those will be provided to the board and will be made available to stakeholders as well. So that's a good place if you think of anything else that you want to submit in writing to the board, because all those comments and the recording from this meeting, which will be posted online and submitted to the board. Joyce, is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
This is Joyce. I do not.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and end the webinar at this time. And again, thank you for participating in the stakeholder meeting today.